Hey Reddit, what are some of your small town WTF stories? I'll start. I was an EMT for a small company. One of our trucks hit a deer in a neighboring jurisdiction. Argument ensued about who got to keep the deer. Man on drugs throws cash register at store clerk. After pursuit that ends when he is captured on the roof of the bowling alley. He ends up in the hospital for having broken an ankle running. Tiny emergency room means he is placed in one of the two neighboring beds, the other being occupied by the store clerk. Hilarity ensues. High school classmate brought to school a decaying human skull he found on his farm. He wasn't sure what it was. It came from a man who'd been murdered in the winter, then stuffed into a drainage tube on this guy's farm. When spring came, thawing snow and rain washed the remains out into the clearing where he found the skull. My hometown once had its major roads shut down because a rafter of wild turkeys decided to hang out in the street for a day. Why do I get the feeling you like telling this story just because you get to say the phrase rafter of turkeys? I lived next to a farm in Siler City, NC. One day as a kid I walked down the road to explore under the bridge on my road. To my surprise, I found a bag full of rotten cow carcasses. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona in the 80s. As a kid, one of my favorite places to go with my father was Ruff's Guns and Liquor. And it was exactly what it sounds like, a combination gun and liquor store. I thought that gun porn liquor stores were a common thing. Maybe I live in redneck land. I once lived in a small town in the Appalachians and I have a story somewhat similar to yours. The town was too small to support any kind of hospital, but they had a diner that functioned as both the local watering hole and the doctor's office. The doctor owned the place and also served as the main cook. You could sit at the bar next to someone and not know if they were getting something to eat or if they were about to get inoculated. This town was very small and remote. The schoolhouse I went to is the smallest public school in that state by a long shot. The senior class. This school went K-12 and still only had about 40 kids. Not all of them lived in the town. Did a family tree project and discovered that they were all related. Not even distantly. It was like third cousin or something. The punchline. They still held prom. Also, our neighbor who lived somewhat close as the crow flies, but about 45 minutes driving through mountains, gave my mom her old wood-fired range because she had just been hooked up with electricity and didn't need it anymore. Keep in mind that this was the mid-90s. I have too many stories about that place and the crazy folks who live there. I didn't think any towns like that still existed, but they're out there. They're kind of like time capsules. This gives me hope that Twin Peaks is out there somewhere. I remember we had this old guy we called the Gum Man. He would hang out in the local Piggly Wiggly, a grocery store, all day and ask little kids if they had gone to church that week. If you told him you had, he'd give you a piece of gum. It was only later in life that I found out that he wouldn't give any gum to black kids, only white. After typing this all out I realized how creepy the whole thing actually was. My rural Washington state town was one of those little pockets of bigotry that people forget exist in the Northwest. We had precisely one Jewish family for a while, but they moved away soon after an elementary school teacher told one of their little girls that she and her family had killed Jesus. We also had exactly one black police officer, out of around 4 total, who was constantly treated terribly and assigned to crap work until they finally fired him for no good reason. There's still a lawsuit pending about that, I believe, and in both of these instances, someone wrote an anonymous letter to the local paper saying that the buttholes involved represented the silent majority of the town. We also had the typical hillbilly drug problem that made headlines when our sole 3-unit apartment complex blew up in the middle of our minuscule downtown area. Then there was the time that the local pagan family decided to do a midnight ritual on a railroad bridge and they all got hit by a train. You can imagine what the silent majority thought about that business. On top of all that, our high school mascot was a potato. We had a dog run for mayor, and Lewis and Clark mention us in their journals as the place where they got a particularly bad night's sleep. I can't be the only one that's cracking up at the image of a high school pep rally full of young kids cheering on the hometown potatoes. Every spring my hometown has a livestock festival, a week-long celebration of livestock. One lucky high school girl is crowned the livestock queen and presides over the festivities. A prestigious position to be sure. During the Livestock week, tickets are sold to an event called Cow Patty Bingo, in which an indoor showroom is divided into over 100 small squares and a cow is released onto the floor. If you are lucky enough to have the cow crap into the square you had chosen, you, my friend, are a winner. My high school tried that. The cheerleaders chased it all over the place. It was so frightened of the 30 odd random screaming girls, it attacked one, and then promptly busted down the gates and fled. That was the last time my HS tried that. I was offered $50 to cast a curse on NASCAR. My next door neighbors divorced. The mother won the house. When we moved away, the father bought our house. They are now both in homosexual relationships, living as next door neighbors. That's freaking amazing. I was 16, hanging out on the roof of a local establishment, because what the frick else are you gonna do in a small town America, and a cop in uniform, who was drinking, offered me a beer. 25 now and still occasionally get ID'd, so it's not like I've ever looked older than I am. I went to a field party in WV after bailing my buddy out of jail for DUI. When we got to the party, his arresting officer was there and they drank a beer together. Later the cops brought out boxing gloves so they could box some people at the party. A DUI in WV was $500 fine. I grew up in Memphis, but I used to go to this really small town in Arkansas a couple weekends a month. I got a bowl cut with an actual bowl on my head by a barber with 3 fingers on one hand. I live in a small town. We have a saying, you don't lose your girlfriend, you lose your turn. Cue banjo. I was hanging out with my grandma's neighbor's 2 grandkids. Wes, the boy, wanted to go back in the bush. We lived in a rural area, and so his grandmother let him take me and his sister down the back road on an ATV. We were back there barely 10 minutes before we came across the most horrible stench I've ever smelled. Wes drove towards the smell, and we found a cow graveyard. There were 25 plus dead cows in various states of decay. Wes' sister said she was going to throw up, so we left. Not really that WTF, but I was quite young and had nightmares about zombie cows for months. Gryreyines. Little children, including my sister, set out on school's environment day to pick up trash in woods. Find World War II bomb. Frick putting that in my trash bag. We had this local crazy lady. Everybody called her Crazy Tina. She was fricked. Apparently at one time she was a normal person and had a family and everything. And then she started doing a bunch of drugs and kind of lost it. But man, some of the stuff she did. Crazy. She had a garden in her front yard, which sounds normal, but she was growing rubber boots. Yeah, she had planted like 20 or so rubber boots with just the tops hanging out. And she had another 30 or so just in a huge pile. It's been there for as long as I can remember. She decided one day that she was going to paint her house, which again sounds kind of normal, except instead of doing it like a normal person, she bought a can of spray paint, and instead of spray painting like a normal person to try to get even coverage, she just freaking sprayed it all over. That led to more people going up to her house and spray painting willies and crap on it. Then I guess she got tired of that, so she ripped off like half of her siding. Not all of it, no, just half. And she was the only person in the entire town to have bars on her windows. I don't really live in a town where people put bars on their windows. She is literally the only person here who has done that. And man, you ever walk down the street she lives on, holy crap, she'd be yelling get the frick away from my house, and then you'd have to run away from her and everything. She was nuts. She was like that crazy cat lady from Simpsons, but she had no cats. And yeah, apparently she was once a completely normal and nice person. My mom went to school with her, then something just went off in her brain and she was never the same again. And then, knowing that every living creature on this earth dies alone, she ends up living as a recluse after writing a weird book titled The Philosophy of Time Travel. My brother's university is in a town that is pretty much literally in a cornfield. The instructions on the school's website literally say turn left at the stop sign, because there is only one in the entire town. You can always tell when the seasons change in my town by a man named Leon who walks everywhere. He is an older Indian, Native American, man with long dark hair. When it starts to warm up, every year without fail, he starts to wear his cut-off jean shorts. His legs are always shaved and he oils them down. He completes his look with a button-up Hawaiian shirt, a safari hat, and kids. An oldish lady, I'd say around 50s, who was clearly 2 sandwiches short of a picnic, used to walk around the town all day every day with her dog and just muttering things to herself. Her dog died whilst she was walking it, but she didn't notice and spent most of that day dragging a dog around the village until someone felt the need to mention it. Pretty sad. Also, I never saw her again much after that. That dog is dead. No, just resting. I lived in a medium-sized town in ND as a kid. One day in the summer, about 9 months after hunting season, my buddy and I were walking around a man-made pond in our neighborhood. As we were checking out the pond, we noticed a small stick with what looked like a string tied around it floating on the water. Being 12, we naturally had to have that stick. After a few minutes trying to fish it out, we nabbed it and started tugging. Something kind of heavy was attached to the string, so we kept pulling out of curiosity. Within seconds we had it and pulled up a semi-decomposed buck head, with the antlers still attached. The fur had fallen away, so all we saw was bloated, discolored flesh and no eyes. My buddy and I shared a look over what we'd found, neither having a clue how the heck it had gotten there. We poked at it with sticks, as 12-year-old males do, for a while, then got bored and left. The next day we came back with more friends to examine our find. The stick and head were gone. You have been visited by the holy fruit boy. If you comment tiny turtle, he will bless you with the unlimited holy fruits. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.